Picture this. You're sitting in a living room with two friends. Maybe it's a Wednesday night. There's coffee going cold on the table, someone's dog is begging for attention, and you've just finished talking about that thing at work that's been eating at you. Then someone says, "Should we pray about this?" And in that moment, as three ordinary people bow their heads in an ordinary room, you remember the verse, "Where two or three are gathered in my name, there am I among them." You've heard it 1,000 times. It's the go-to Bible verse for small group meetings, the reassurance offered when church attendance is low, the spiritual consolation prize when the crowd doesn't show up. It's been cross-stitched onto pillows, printed on church bulletins, and quoted so many times it's become Christian background noise. But here's what most of us miss. When Jesus first spoke these words, they weren't comforting, they were revolutionary, they were dangerous. They fundamentally threatened the entire religious system of his day, and if we're honest, they still threaten ours. This isn't just a nice promise that Jesus shows up for small gatherings. This is a complete reimagining of where God can be found, who gets access to the divine, and what it means to experience sacred presence. This is Jesus handing ordinary people the keys to the kingdom and saying, "You don't need anyone's permission." And we've somehow turned it into a participation trophy for when not enough people show up to church. Let's recover what made this statement so radical that it's been watered down for 2,000 years. Because once you see it, you can't unsee it, and it might just change how you think about God, community, and where the sacred actually lives. The context everyone misses to understand why Matthew 18:20 was explosive. You need to understand what first-century Jews believed about encountering God. The temple in Jerusalem wasn't just important, it was everything. It was the single place on earth where heaven and earth touched. The Holy of Holies, the innermost chamber of the temple, was where God's presence literally dwelt. Once a year, on the Day of Atonement, the high priest would enter that space, and the entire religious system depended on that moment. You couldn't just walk up to God. There was protocol, there was hierarchy, there were layers of access based on your gender, your tribal lineage, your ritual purity. If you were a Gentile, you stayed in the outer court. If you were a Jewish woman, you got a bit closer. Jewish men, closer still. Levites and priests, closer. And only the high priest, once a year, trembling, could enter the actual presence. The temple wasn't just a building, it was the infrastructure of the divine. It was where sacrifices were made, where sins were atoned for, where God lived. Synagogues existed for study and prayer, but they weren't replacements for the temple, the real action, the real presence, the real access. That was in Jerusalem, behind walls, mediated by professionals, governed by centuries of tradition. And then Jesus says, "Actually, forget all that. 2 or 3 of you, just gather in my name, I'll be there." Do you see how insane this is? He's saying you don't need the temple, you don't need the priests, you don't need the sacrificial system, the annual pilgrimage, the mediation of religious authorities. You don't even need a special building. You need 2 other people and a common purpose centered on him. This isn't tweaking the system, this is blowing it up. The phrase "in my name" is crucial here. In the ancient world, someone's name represented their authority, their character, their very essence. To gather in Jesus' name wasn't just saying a magic phrase at the end of a prayer. It meant gathering under his authority, aligned with his purposes, representing his character. It meant that where his followers gathered with genuine unity around his mission, he himself would be present, not symbolically, not metaphorically, but actually. Jesus was claiming that he could be present anywhere, with anyone, at any time, not in the Holy of Holies, not through priestly mediation, just wherever his people gathered. This was either the most arrogant blasphemy imaginable, or it was the announcement of a completely new reality, and his first hearers understood exactly what he was claiming, the radical democracy of divine presence. Let's sit with the implications for a moment, because they're staggering. First, Jesus was dismantling the entire priestly monopoly on access to God. For centuries, the priests had been the gatekeepers. They performed the rituals, they made the sacrifices, they knew the protocols. If you wanted to approach God, you went through them. They weren't just religious leaders, they were essential mediators. The system required them, and Jesus just made them optional. He's saying that 2 fishermen, or 3 tax collectors, or a handful of women, or any random combination of his followers could access the full presence of God without a single credentialed religious professional in the room. No seminary degree required, no ordination, no special bloodline, no institutional approval. This is spiritual democracy at its most radical. The divine presence isn't rationed out by authorities, it's not controlled by institutions, it's not limited to sacred buildings or sacred days or sacred people. It's available wherever 2 or 3 genuine followers gather with genuine intent. Think about the minimum number, 2 or 3, not 10, which was the minimum for a Jewish prayer quorum, a minyan, not 70, which had symbolic resonance in Jewish tradition. Not the 12 disciples, not the 72 sent out, not the crowds of thousands. 2 or 3. Jesus set the bar so low that there's no excuse for anyone to feel excluded from divine presence. You can't say, well, there aren't enough of us. You can't say we don't have the right people. You can't say we need to wait until we're more established. 2 people with genuine hearts and a common purpose centered on Christ? That's enough. That's church. That's sacred space. That's the dwelling place of God. This terrified religious authorities then, and it should terrify them now, because if people actually believed this, really believed it, the entire power structure of institutional religion becomes optional. You don't need the cathedral. You don't need the denominational headquarters. You don't need the approval of bishops or boards or councils. You need Jesus and 2 other people. Now, before someone freaks out and thinks I'm anti-church or anti-institution, hold on. Larger gatherings have value. Traditions have wisdom. Structures serve purposes. But Jesus was making sure that access to God could never be monopolized by those structures. He was ensuring that the smallest, most marginalized, most overlooked gathering had the full presence of the divine. The megachurch with 10,000 people, Jesus is there. The cathedral with centuries of history, Jesus is there. But also, and this is the revolutionary part, the 2 refugees praying in a detention center, Jesus is there. The 3 believers in a hostile country meeting in secret, Jesus is there. The handful of people who can't get to a church building because of disability or distance or disillusionment, Jesus is there. The presence of God cannot be contained, cannot be controlled, cannot be monopolized. It goes where 2 or 3 gather in His name. Period. What gathered really means, but let's be careful here, because Jesus wasn't just talking about physical proximity. The word gathered implies something more than just being in the same room. You can have 2 or 3 people in the same space and be completely disconnected. You can sit in a church service with hundreds of people and be utterly alone. Physical presence isn't the same as being gathered. To be gathered means to be assembled with purpose, to be drawn together by something common. It's not accidental, it's not incidental, it's intentional. There's a reason you're together, a shared focus, a unified heart. This is why the phrase "in my name" is so important. You're not just hanging out, you're gathering around Jesus, around his teachings, his character, his mission, his presence. You're aligning yourselves with his purposes. There's a spiritual center to the gathering, not just a social one. This means that 3 Christians sitting in a coffee shop complaining about other Christians probably doesn't qualify. They're physically together, but are they gathered in Jesus' name? Are they aligned with his purposes of love, reconciliation, and grace, or are they just bonding over shared grievances? On the other hand, 2 people sitting in silence together, opening their hearts to God's presence and to each other, creating space for the Spirit to move. That's being gathered. That's the kind of unity and intentionality Jesus was talking about. The modern church has sometimes reduced this to a formula: open with prayer, do a Bible study, close with prayer, and boom, you've met the requirements. But Jesus wasn't giving a formula. He was describing a reality. When people genuinely gather around him, he shows up. Not because they followed the right steps, but because they created the kind of space where his presence is welcomed and recognized. This has profound implications for how we think about spiritual community. It means that authenticity matters more than format. Heart posture matters more than location. Genuine connection matters more than program structure. It also means we can stop with the excuses. I can't find a church that feels right. The small group options don't fit my schedule. I don't connect with the people at my church. Okay, find 1 or 2 other people who want to genuinely seek God together. Gather, be intentional, create space for Jesus. He promises to show up, but it also means we can't isolate ourselves and call it spiritual. Being gathered requires others. It requires the humility of shared space, shared vulnerability, shared seeking. You can't experience this promise alone, the mystical mathematics of 2 or 3. Let's talk about the specific number, because it's not random. Why not 1? Why isn't Jesus' presence available to the solitary seeker? Well, it is. Jesus clearly spent time alone in prayer, and contemplative traditions have valued solitude for centuries. But there's something about the relational dynamic that matters here. Faith isn't just a private transaction between you and God. It's lived out in community, in relationship, in the messy reality of being with other people. One person can have their own echo chamber, their own distortions, their own unchallenged assumptions. 2 or 3 people have to navigate difference, have to practice love, have to work out what it means to follow Jesus together. There's a refining that happens in community that doesn't happen in isolation. In Jewish law, 2 or 3 witnesses established truth. By the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses, every word shall be established. There's a legal, testimonial weight to this number. When 2 or 3 gather, there's accountability, there's confirmation, there's the ability to discern together what's true. But why not more? Why not set the minimum at 10 or 20 or 100? Because Jesus was establishing the smallest possible community unit. He was saying that the full reality of his presence doesn't require scale. You don't need crowds. You don't need critical mass. You don't need to wait until you're big enough or established enough or impressive enough. 2 or 3 is the sweet spot between isolation and anonymity. It's small enough for real intimacy, real vulnerability, real knowing. It's large enough for genuine community, for witnessing each other's lives, for bearing one another's burdens. In a group of 2 or 3, you can't hide. You can't be a spectator. You can't coast on the energy of the crowd. You have to show up. You have to be present. You have to contribute. And that's exactly where transformation happens. There's also something beautifully inefficient about this number. If Jesus wanted maximum reach, he'd encourage the biggest gatherings possible. But he's more interested in depth and breadth, in quality than quantity, in transformation than metrics. 2 or 3 people genuinely encountering Jesus together will change the world more than 1,000 people passively consuming religious content. This is why small groups, prayer partnerships, and intimate spiritual friendships are so powerful. They're not second-tier Christianity for when you can't get a big crowd. They're the ideal environment Jesus himself described for encountering his presence. When this verse gets weaponized, but we need to address how this verse can be misused, because it absolutely can be. Every church split in history has probably included someone quoting Matthew 18:20 to justify breaking away. We don't need them. Jesus promised to be with us, just the few of us who really get it. Every exclusive, elitist, judgmental little group has used this verse to validate their isolation and superiority. This is where we have to remember that Jesus' entire ministry was about breaking down walls, not building them. He was constantly crossing boundaries, including outcasts, challenging the religious in-groups who thought they had exclusive access to God. So when he promises his presence to the small gathering, he's not encouraging cliquishness, he's ensuring accessibility. There's a difference between intimacy and isolation, between depth and exclusion. A small group that gathers in Jesus' name should be characterized by the same radical welcome Jesus demonstrated. It might be small, but its heart should be open. It might be intimate, but it shouldn't be cliquish. The gathering of 2 or 3 should be a laboratory for love, not a bunker for the like-minded. It should be a place where people learn to extend grace, practice forgiveness, and grow in Christ-likeness, which necessarily means being challenged, not just affirmed. When small groups become echo chambers, when they reinforce prejudices rather than challenging them, when they create an us versus them mentality, they're not gathered in Jesus' name no matter what they claim. Jesus' character is love, inclusion, grace, and truth. A gathering in his name should reflect those values. This is also why the small gathering shouldn't replace larger community entirely. Yes, Jesus promises his presence to 2 or 3, but he also sent out the 72, fed the 5,000, and envisioned a global movement of disciples. The intimate gathering and the larger community serve different purposes and need each other. The small group keeps you known, challenged, and accountable. The larger gathering expands your perspective, exposes you to different expressions of faith, and reminds you that God's family is bigger than your comfort zone. The danger comes when we use Matthew 18:20 as an excuse to avoid the larger body, to stay only with people who think exactly like us, to create comfortable little spiritual clubs. That's not what Jesus was offering. He was democratizing access to God, while still calling people into the challenging, diverse, messy reality of the larger community. The modern crisis. This verse addresses. Here's why this ancient verse hits different. In our current moment, we're living through a crisis of both loneliness and institutional distrust. Study after study confirms what most of us feel: we're more connected digitally and more isolated relationally than ever before. We have hundreds of social media friends and no one to call at 2 a.m. We're in constant communication and profound loneliness. We're starving for real connection. At the same time, trust in institutions, including religious ones, is at historic lows. People have been hurt by churches, disillusioned by hypocrisy, exhausted by culture war posturing, and alienated by the gap between what's preached and what's practiced. The Pew Research Center consistently finds increasing numbers of people identifying as spiritual but not religious, seeking God outside traditional structures. And into this exact moment, Jesus' promise in Matthew 18:20 speaks with fresh power. You're lonely? You don't need to wait for an institution to meet your needs. Find two other people who want to genuinely seek God together. Gather. He'll be there. You're done with institutional religion? You don't need the institution to access God's presence. You need authentic community centered on Jesus. The building is optional. The denomination is optional. The program is optional. Jesus and two other people, that's not optional. That's the promise. This verse offers a third way between isolated individualism and institutional dependence. You don't have to choose between being a Lone Ranger Christian or submitting to systems that have hurt you. You can gather with 2 or 3 others and experience the fullness of Christ's presence. This is particularly powerful for people in contexts where traditional church isn't accessible or safe. Maybe you're in a part of the world where Christians are persecuted. Maybe you work night shifts and can't attend Sunday services. Maybe you're disabled and church buildings aren't accessible. Maybe you're in a season of life where getting out is nearly impossible. Maybe you've been so wounded by church that walking into a building triggers trauma. Jesus says, that's okay. You don't need the building. Find 2 other people. Meet in a home, a park, a hospital room, a prison cell, a Zoom call if that's what you've got. Gather in my name. I'll be there. The digital age has actually made this more possible than ever. You can gather virtually with people across the globe. You can find others who share your specific struggles, your questions, your search for authentic faith. The technology that isolates us can also be redeemed to connect us in meaningful ways. But, and this is crucial, it has to be real. It has to be more than consuming content together. It has to involve actual presence, actual vulnerability, actual commitment to each other. Watching a sermon together isn't the same as gathering in Jesus' name, though it could be part of it. The gathering requires participation, not just observation. What our moment desperately needs is exactly what Jesus promised: authentic, intimate, accessible spiritual community. Not more programs, not bigger buildings, not slicker presentations, just real people really seeking God together, really practicing love and grace and truth in relationship. And here's the beautiful subversive truth. Institutions can't control this. They can't monopolize it. They can't market it or franchise it or turn it into a product. It's organic, it's decentralized, it's available to anyone. It's the kind of movement that spreads person to person, heart to heart, living room to living room. This terrifies religious systems that depend on control and metrics. But it's exactly what Jesus intended, living into this promise. So how do we actually do this? How do we move from reading about it to experiencing it? First, take the initiative. Don't wait for someone else to organize it. Don't wait for the perfect people or the perfect time. Find 1 or 2 people, maybe someone from your church, maybe a neighbor, maybe someone you've connected with online, who wants to genuinely seek God together. Second, be intentional, but don't be formulaic. You don't need a curriculum or a program. You need to show up with open hearts and genuine desire to encounter Jesus together. That might look like prayer. It might look like discussing scripture. It might look like sharing your actual lives and then inviting God into what you're walking through. It might look like extended silence together. It might look... Picture this. You're sitting in a living room with 2 friends. Maybe it's a Wednesday night. There's coffee going cold on the table, someone's dog is begging for attention, and you've just finished talking about that thing at work that's been eating at you. Then someone says, "Should we pray about this?" And in that moment, as three ordinary people bow their heads in an ordinary room, you remember the verse, where two or three are gathered in my name, there am I among them. You've heard it 1,000 times. It's the go-to Bible verse for small group meetings, the reassurance offered when church attendance is low, the spiritual consolation prize when the crowd doesn't show up. It's been cross-stitched onto pillows, printed on church bulletins, and quoted so many times it's become Christian background noise. But here's what most of us miss. When Jesus first spoke these words, they weren't comforting, they were revolutionary, they were dangerous. They fundamentally threatened the entire religious system of his day, and if we're honest, they still threaten ours. This isn't just a nice promise that Jesus shows up for small gatherings. This is a complete reimagining of where God can be found, who gets access to the divine, and what it means to experience sacred presence. This is Jesus handing ordinary people the keys to the kingdom and saying, you don't need anyone's permission. And we've somehow turned it into a participation trophy for when not enough people show up to church. Let's recover what made this statement so radical that it's been watered down for 2,000 years. Because once you see it, you can't unsee it, and it might just change how you think about God, community, and where the sacred actually lives. The context everyone misses to understand why Matthew 18:20 was explosive. You need to understand what first-century Jews believed about encountering God. The temple in Jerusalem wasn't just important, it was everything. It was the single place on earth where heaven and earth touched. The Holy of Holies, the innermost chamber of the temple, was where God's presence literally dwelt. Once a year, on the Day of Atonement, the high priest would enter that space, and the entire religious system depended on that moment. You couldn't just walk up to God. There was protocol, there was hierarchy, there were layers of access based on your gender, your tribal lineage, your ritual purity. If you were a Gentile, you stayed in the outer court. If you were a Jewish woman, you got a bit closer. Jewish men, closer still. Levites and priests, closer. And only the high priest, once a year, trembling, could enter the actual presence. The temple wasn't just a building, it was the infrastructure of the divine. It was where sacrifices were made, where sins were atoned for, where God lived. Synagogues existed for study and prayer, but they weren't replacements for the temple, the real action, the real presence, the real access. That was in Jerusalem, behind walls, mediated by professionals, governed by centuries of tradition. And then Jesus says, actually, forget all that. 2 or 3 of you, just gather in my name, I'll be there. Do you see how insane this is? He's saying you don't need the temple, you don't need the priests, you don't need the sacrificial system, the annual pilgrimage, the mediation of religious authorities. You don't even need a special building. You need 2 other people and a common purpose centered on him. This isn't tweaking the system, this is blowing it up. The phrase "in my name" is crucial here. In the ancient world, someone's name represented their authority, their character, their very essence. To gather in Jesus' name wasn't just saying a magic phrase at the end of a prayer. It meant gathering under his authority, aligned with his purposes, representing his character. It meant that where his followers gathered with genuine unity around his mission, he himself would be present, not symbolically, not metaphorically, but actually. Jesus was claiming that he could be present anywhere, with anyone, at any time, not in the Holy of Holies, not through priestly mediation, just wherever his people gathered. This was either the most arrogant blasphemy imaginable, or it was the announcement of a completely new reality, and his first hearers understood exactly what he was claiming, the radical democracy of divine presence. Let's sit with the implications for a moment, because they're staggering. First, Jesus was dismantling the entire priestly monopoly on access to God. For centuries, the priests had been the gatekeepers. They performed the rituals, they made the sacrifices, they knew the protocols. If you wanted to approach God, you went through them. They weren't just religious leaders, they were essential mediators. The system required them, and Jesus just made them optional. He's saying that 2 fishermen, or 3 tax collectors, or a handful of women, or any random combination of his followers could access the full presence of God without a single credentialed religious professional in the room. No seminary degree required, no ordination, no special bloodline, no institutional approval. This is spiritual democracy at its most radical. The divine...
My friends, for many years we have labored under the belief that the spiritual life is achieved by effort, by striving, by pleading, by searching for some distant God who must be persuaded to enter our experience. And yet, the entire spiritual path rests upon a paradox so profound that it overturns every one of these concepts. The moment you cease trying to make God act, God begins to reveal himself. The moment you relinquish the strain of human effort, the divine presence that is forever lived within you becomes active as your very life. You see, the great barrier in our journey is not God's unwillingness, nor God's absence, nor God's delay. It is the simple fact that the human self insists upon doing what only the infinite can accomplish. We try to heal ourselves. We try to shape our supply. We try to direct our relationships. We try to improve our own nature through the machinery of the human mind. And in all of this trying, we unconsciously affirm that we are separate beings attempting to reach a God who is far away. This is the hidden belief behind every effort, but the infinite way was born of a discovery. God is not moved by effort. God is revealed in stillness. God is not reached by struggle. God is present in the quiet recognition that there is nothing to reach. The presence, the activity, the life of God is already where you are. It has been the fabric of your being since before time began. And so, I invite you to consider this paradox deeply. Nothing in your spiritual experience changes through effort, but everything changes the moment you release effort. Not as resignation, not as despair, but as the dawning realization that you are not the one who brings God into action. The Father within does the works. The presence functions of its own accord. The kingdom unfolds from within itself. Your part is simply to stop obstructing that flow with the noise of personal striving. This is the beginning of our journey today, an exploration of that sacred turning point in consciousness, the day you stop trying, and the wondrous activity of God that becomes visible the instant personal will grows quiet. Let us look more deeply now at this burden that humanity carries, the endless compulsion to try, to struggle, to push against life as though the responsibility for the universe rested upon our shoulders. Every one of us has, at some time, believed that our safety, our healing, our supply, our very spiritual progress depended upon the intensity of our effort. And yet, my friends, if you will observe closely, you will see that all such effort begins with fear, fear that God is not present, fear that God will not act, fear that the universe is operating independently of our good. This fear takes subtle forms. It makes us believe we must constantly adjust, solve, improve, overcome. We try to manage our bodies, our finances, our children, our future, as though life were a mechanism that could malfunction unless we monitored it every waking moment. And so the human being becomes weary, not because life is burdensome, but because the false sense of self imagines it must do everything. But hear this. The human mind has no capacity to bring forth harmony. The human will has no capacity to govern the activity of spirit. The personal self, however well-meaning, cannot add a single cubit to its stature through effort. And the tragedy is that in all of this striving, we reinforce the illusion that there is a separate self who must take charge of what is already governed by the infinite. This is the root of the human problem. Not sin, not ignorance, not circumstance, but the deep psychological and spiritual conditioning that whispers, if I do not act, nothing will happen, and in obedience to that whisper, the individual plunges into anxiety, trying to fix life from the outside, instead of entering the inner stillness where life is already whole. Goldsmith's discovery and the revelation of every mystic who has seen reality is simply this: life is not lived by the human being. Life is lived by God through the human being. And every moment of strain, every moment of mental wrestling is an invisible declaration that we have forgotten this great truth. Therefore, before we can speak of surrender, before we can speak of grace, we must recognize how deeply we have trusted in our personal effort and how sincerely but mistakenly we have attempted to solve spiritual realities with human means. When this recognition dawns, not as guilt but as revelation, the burden begins to dissolve. The heart grows weary of striving, not in defeat, but in readiness for a higher way. There comes a moment in the life of every earnest seeker, a moment not planned, not manufactured, not forced, when the personal will simply begins to grow quiet. Not because you have conquered it, not because you have subdued it, but because you have begun to see through it. You begin to realize that all your attempts to direct life have led you only to temporary results and repeated frustrations. And in that realization, there is a gentle softening, an inner surrender that is not resignation but awakening. You discover, perhaps for the first time, that you are not required to run the universe. You are not required to sustain your body, or your supply, or your relationships through personal strength. You begin to sense an unseen activity, a presence that has always been moving quietly beneath the surface of things, waiting only for your silence, your non-interference, your willingness to let it be what it is. This is the turning point, and it is never dramatic, it is never thunderous. It arrives as a stillness, a moment of recognition. I can of my own self do nothing. These were not the words of a helpless man, they were the words of one who saw that the human self has no power apart from the infinite. In that recognition, the personal will dissolves like a shadow in the presence of light. As the will grows quiet, a new form of awareness emerges. You begin to listen not with your ears, but with your inner being. You sense that guidance is not something you create, it is something revealed. Harmony is not something you achieve, it is something already present. Healing is not something you produce, it is something that appears when obstruction is removed. This quieting is the beginning of grace, and you cannot force it, for forcing is the activity of the very will that must become still. Rather, it comes by seeing the futility of striving, the hollowness of personal control, and the peace that arises when you allow life to unfold of its own accord. It is at this point that a profound shift occurs. You stop trying to make God act, and you begin to recognize that God is already acting. You stop trying to generate spiritual experience, and you begin to recognize the presence that has never ceased to be the activity of your being. This turning point is the slender doorway through which the infinite enters your conscious awareness. When the personal will grows quiet, even for a moment, you find yourself entering a new atmosphere of consciousness, an inner chamber where the noise of the world does not penetrate and where the presence of God becomes a living reality. This is the sacred place of stillness that every mystic has spoken of, not as a metaphor, not as an ideal, but as an actual state of awareness in which the soul communes directly with the infinite. Understand this. True prayer is not thought. True prayer is not words. True prayer is not asking. The most powerful prayer you will ever know is the prayer in which you say nothing at all. It is the prayer of receptivity, the prayer of listening, the prayer in which the mind becomes a transparent instrument through which the spirit announces itself. You see, God does not speak in the language of human words. God speaks in a language of awareness, of inner knowing, of quiet unfolding. And you cannot hear that sacred language while the mind is busy pleading, affirming, visualizing, or attempting to direct the infinite according to its own desires. The human mind must become still, utterly still, before the activity of God can be felt. This inner chamber has been called many things: the secret place of the Most High, the closet, the deep silence, the Holy of Holies. But it is not a physical location. It is an inner posture, a yielding of the mind, a resting of the emotions, a quiet place within where you cease trying to think your way to God and instead allow God to reveal himself. And the beauty of this silence is that it does not require hours of meditation. It requires only a moment in which you turn inward and recognize the presence is here. I need do nothing. That recognition opens the door. That recognition shifts the center of activity from the human to the divine. In this silence, you are not trying to change anything. You are not working on a problem. You are not seeking guidance. You are simply abiding in the awareness of God's presence. And in that abiding, something extraordinary happens. The divine activity begins to function without your thought, without your effort, without your direction. This is the secret of spiritual living. God is always speaking, always revealing, always unfolding. It is only the constant noise of human striving that prevents us from hearing. When you enter the silence, not as escape, but as receptivity, you will discover that the infinite has been conducting the harmony of your life long before you ever knew it. There comes, in the life of every earnest seeker, a day that is unlike any day before it. It may not arrive with fanfare, and it may not come in the way you expect, but it is a day marked by a profound inner shift. It is the day you stop trying, not because you have failed, and not because you have given up, but because something within you has awakened to a deeper truth. The Father within does the work. On that day, you discover that your efforts have never been the source of harmony. Your prayers, your methods, your affirmations, sincere though they were, never produced the action of God. They only reflected your desire to reach what was already present. And in that realization, something releases. The tension goes out of your mind. The strain leaves your heart. You stop attempting to manage life, and you begin to perceive that life is managing itself through you. This moment is grace. And grace is not something you call forth. It is something that becomes visible when obstruction is removed. Grace has always been the activity of your being. Grace has always been the intelligence guiding the universe. But as long as you believe you must make God act, you cannot witness what God is already doing. When trying ceases, fear begins to dissolve, because fear is always born from the belief that you must protect, sustain, or secure yourself. But when you realize that the infinite is the life of your being, fear has no foundation on which to stand. You feel a quiet certainty, a holy assurance that nothing real can be threatened and nothing true can be taken from you. In the moment of grace, you sense that God is not something you reach, but the very essence of your being revealing itself. You recognize that every breath, every heartbeat, every unfolding event is moving according to a harmony that does not originate in human thought. And you discover a new way of living. You stop directing and begin witnessing. You stop pleading and begin listening. You stop fearing and begin trusting. You stop working from the outside and begin resting in the inner presence that needs no assistance from you. This moment of grace does not come as the result of effort, but as the cessation of effort. When the noise of striving falls silent, the gentle voice of the infinite is heard, and in that hearing, everything changes, not because you have changed conditions, but because you have awakened to the one who governs them all. This is the day you stop trying. This is the day God becomes visible not as a distant power to be persuaded, but as the living activity of your own consciousness. Now let us look at why effort, sincere, devoted, dedicated effort, actually blocks the very grace we long to experience. This is one of the deepest revelations of the spiritual life, and until it is understood, a student can spend years circling the same mountains, wondering why prayers seem unanswered and why peace appears elusive. The reason is simple. Effort is always the activity of the separated self. Effort says, I must accomplish this. I must bring harmony. I must overcome this condition. And the moment you take that position, you have unknowingly placed yourself outside of the infinite, believing there is you on one side and God on the other. In that very belief lies the obstruction. You see, God is not something separate from you. God is the very substance of your being. God is the life, the intelligence, the activity of your consciousness. So when the personal self attempts to reach God, it is like a wave trying to reach the ocean. The very act of striving affirms a separation that never existed, and in that affirmation, grace is obscured, not withheld, but hidden behind the veil of your own self-effort. Goldsmith discovered a profound spiritual law. Any attempt to use God for personal ends separates the seeker from the experience of God. You cannot use truth, because truth is not a tool, it is your identity. You cannot employ God to change conditions, because God is not a power operating upon something outside itself. God is the one power, the one presence, the one reality. The moment you try to harness this power for human improvement, you are no longer resting in the spiritual understanding of one, but have slipped back into the belief in two. Effort arises from fear and from the false assumption that the universe requires your intervention. But the infinite way teaches that nothing true needs your assistance. Harmony is never created, it is revealed. Supply is never manufactured, it is unfolded. Healing is never produced, it is recognized. These are spiritual principles, and they function only when the mind becomes still enough to let the invisible act. The invisible law of the Spirit is this: where the personal self acts, grace is silent. Where the personal self is silent, grace acts. And so, when you cease striving, you are not becoming passive. You are stepping aside so that the divine activity, which has been present all along, may become visible in your experience. It is not your effort that heals, but your surrender. Not your plans that prosper you, but your willingness to trust the unseen order of the universe. Not your strength that carries you, but the realization that the infinite is the life that lives you. And as this becomes clear, you begin to understand why the great mystics have always taught that the highest spiritual work is not doing, but recognizing the presence, recognizing the one, recognizing that God is the only activity, and therefore there is nothing left for the personal self to accomplish. Now that we understand why effort obscures grace, we can begin to explore what life feels like when the personal self no longer carries the burden of directing, controlling, and managing existence. When the striving ceases and the inner ear opens to the activity of the spirit, a new way of living begins, one that is marked by harmony, guidance, and quiet inner assurance. This is not the life you build. It is the life that unfolds through you when you make yourself an open avenue for the infinite. The first sign of this new way of life is that you begin to act from a center of peace rather than from fear. Decisions are no longer frantic reactions to circumstances. They arise gently from within, as though whispered by an intelligence deeper than your own. You find yourself responding to situations with clarity. You did not cultivate. Compassion you did not manufacture. Wisdom you cannot claim as personal achievement. You recognize that something greater is living itself as you. Another sign is that problems lose their power to disturb you. This does not mean that appearances suddenly vanish, but your relationship to them changes completely. Instead of rushing into analysis, strategizing, or mental argument, you pause just long enough to remember that you are not a human being burdened with problems, but the transparency through which God expresses. In that pause, harmony begins to reveal itself without the slightest interference of personal thought. In this way of life, even the simplest moments become sacred. Washing a dish, speaking to a friend, answering an email, all of it becomes an opportunity to abide in the awareness that the infinite is the activity behind every gesture. You begin to sense that nothing is mundane and nothing is separate from the presence. Every task becomes an act of devotion, not because you perform it for God, but because you perform it with God as the living presence expressing itself. This daily life is not passive. It is deeply alive. It is alert, sensitive, responsive to the inner movement rather than the outer demand. You discover that you no longer must figure out your path. The path unfolds. You no longer must chase supply. Supply appears as needed. You no longer must manage relationships. Relationships begin to harmonize themselves when you meet every person from the consciousness of one. And as you walk in this new way, you notice something remarkable. Your effectiveness in the world increases, not because of greater effort, but because the source of all effectiveness is now functioning through you. The infinite way is not an escape from living. It is the deepest engagement with life, carried out from the center of God's activity rather than the strain of the personal will. In this flowing, effortless unfoldment, you begin to see the truth of Goldsmith's statement. The secret of living is letting God live your life. And once this truth is felt, not merely understood intellectually, but felt in the quiet depths of your being, you will never again seek to return to the life of struggle. The taste of inner peace is enough to make striving impossible, for you have discovered a better way, the way of letting God be God in you. As you begin living from this inner stillness, without the burden of constant striving, something remarkable occurs. Life itself begins to reveal a harmony that was always present but long concealed by fear, effort, and personal will. And the evidence of this surrender does not come through dramatic miracles or sudden outward changes, though such things may happen. The true evidence appears quietly, gently, as if life were redeeming itself from within. The first and most unmistakable evidence is the disappearance of fear, not because conditions have changed, but because your sense of identity has changed. When you no longer see yourself as a vulnerable creature struggling in a chaotic universe, but as the expression of the infinite, Fear loses its foundation. You discover a peace that does not depend on circumstances, and this peace becomes the atmosphere in which you live. Then you notice that relationships begin to soften. People who once seemed difficult no longer evoke the same reactions within you. You meet them not with personal judgment or memory, but with the recognition of the same presence that lives in you. And because you see differently, they respond differently, not by your manipulation, but by the silent influence of the consciousness you now embody. The world begins to meet you according to your realization of oneness. Another evidence is that solutions appear without struggle. A problem that once consumed your mind shows a way forward at the moment you release it into the silence. Supply that you once chased now flows naturally. Opportunities arise that you never planned. These are not coincidences. They are the outward signs of an inward shift. When you cease trying to control life, the divine order becomes free to manifest through the avenues prepared for it. Healing, too, begins to unfold not necessarily as instantaneous transformation, though that is possible, but as the gradual revelation that the life within you has never been sick, never broken, never incomplete. The healing does not come because you worked on the condition. It comes because you stopped believing that the condition had power. Grace reveals what has always been true. The Spirit of God within you is whole, and therefore wholeness must appear in your experience. As this surrender deepens, you begin to realize that nothing in your outer world is separate from the activity of your inner being. Life becomes a mirror reflecting your consciousness. When you abide in peace, peace appears around you. When you abide in quiet trust, the events of your life begin to move with quiet order. When you abide in the awareness of God's presence, you find that God's presence meets you in every place you walk. And so the evidence of surrender is not something you create, but something you witness. It is the dawning recognition that the universe is benevolent, that the infinite is trustworthy, and that harmony is the natural condition of life once the personal self steps aside. You begin to see that grace was never absent. It was only obstructed by the noise of striving. When surrender has taken root, life begins to redeem itself, not because you have changed the outer world, but because you have awakened to the inner presence that has always governed all things with perfect wisdom. And now, as we draw this class to a close, let us return to the essence of what has been revealed here. The entire spiritual life rests upon a single, simple recognition. God is the life of your being, and therefore there is nothing for the human self to accomplish. The Father's presence is already within you. The activity of spirit has never ceased. Harmony has never been absent. Yet the human mind, in its perpetual striving, has obscured this ever-present reality. The call of the infinite way is not a call to effort, to striving, or to achievement. It is a call to inner rest, the rest that comes when you relinquish the belief that you must make something happen and instead allow the divine activity to reveal itself. This rest is not inactivity. It is the cessation of mental noise that enables the still, small voice to be heard. And so I invite you now, gently and without pressure, to adopt a new inner attitude as you go forth from this moment. I will not attempt to direct God. I will be still and let God be God. This is the doorway to grace. This is the state of consciousness in which all good becomes visible. Do not attempt to practice this with strain or discipline. Simply pause throughout your day, even if only for a breath, and acknowledge the presence. Let the recognition arise. The Father within me is the one who performs every act I need do nothing of myself, and you will discover that this simple turning within opens your awareness to a depth of peace you may not have known was possible. In that peace, guidance will come not from your reasoning mind, but from the divine impulse that knows your path better than you ever could. In that peace, solutions will unfold not as the result of analysis, but as the natural activity of God. In that peace, you will discover your true identity, not a struggling mortal, but the transparency through which the infinite expresses its own perfection. And as this realization settles into your consciousness, you will find that life becomes the effortless outpouring of a presence that has always been yours. The world may continue its noise, but you will walk through it with quiet certainty. Circumstances may shift and change, but you will remain anchored in the awareness that the harmony of God governs all. You will live each day not as one who must struggle, but as one who has surrendered to the divine activity already at work. So let us leave here today with a simple prayer, not spoken with words, but felt in the depth of our being. Father, I release all striving. Reveal thy presence as the activity of my life. In that prayer, the whole spiritual path is contained. In that prayer, every answer is given before the question arises. In that prayer, the seeker becomes the instrument of God's living presence. Go in peace, not because peace is something you acquire, but because peace is what you are when the striving ceases and the infinite begins to shine without obstruction. The class is ended.
What if I told you that every single night while you sleep, your body is performing miracles that most modern medicine can't explain, yet you're actively preventing these miracles from happening without even realizing it? Think about it for a moment. You lie down exhausted. You close your eyes for what should be 8 hours of restoration, and yet you wake up feeling just as tired, foggy, and depleted as when you went to bed. Has this ever happened to you? You're not alone, and more importantly, this isn't normal. But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. And if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our future videos. Now, here's something that Joel Goldsmith understood decades ago. Something that modern science is only now beginning to catch up with. Sleep isn't just a time when your brain shuts down and your body rests. No, something far more profound is happening. During those hours of darkness, while your conscious mind drifts away, your physical body is supposed to reconnect with what Goldsmith called divine healing energies. These aren't abstract spiritual concepts. We're talking about actual tangible processes that repair cellular damage, regenerate tissue, fight off disease, and restore the delicate balance of every system in your body. But here's where it gets shocking. Most people are blocking this natural healing process every single night. They're creating barriers between their physical body and the spiritual source of regeneration that wants to flow through them. And the consequences? They're walking around with chronic illness, premature aging, mental fog, and a deep sense of spiritual disconnection, wondering why nothing seems to help, why they can't seem to get better no matter what they try. Goldsmith taught that your body is a self-healing temple, designed with extraordinary regenerative capacity built right into your DNA. Every cell knows how to repair itself. Every organ knows how to detoxify and restore. This wisdom is hardwired into your very existence. But modern life has erected walls around this temple. We've filled our nights with habits, thoughts, and environments that actively sever the connection between our physical form and the divine power that seeks to heal us. What you're about to discover might surprise you, because the answer isn't found in another supplement, another medical intervention, or another expensive treatment. The answer lies in understanding what's happening in those 8 hours you spend unconscious each night. Every single evening, you face a choice. Though you probably don't realize you're making it, your body is either moving toward vibrant health and restoration, or it's accelerating toward deterioration and disease. And this choice isn't determined by your genetics, your age, or even your current health condition. Stay with me until the end of this video, because what Goldsmith revealed about the relationship between sleep, spiritual alignment, and physical healing has the power to transform not just how you sleep, but how you heal, how you age, and how you experience life itself. The simple changes we're about to explore could unlock healing miracles that your body is desperately trying to perform right now, tonight, if only you would stop blocking them. So let me ask you again, what's really happening during those 8 hours of sleep? Think about what's actually happening right now. In millions of bedrooms across the world, people are lying down, closing their eyes, and entering what Joel Goldsmith described as the body's communion with the infinite. This isn't poetic language meant to sound spiritual. This is the hidden truth about what sleep really is. When your conscious mind finally releases its grip and drifts into dreams, your physical form doesn't just power down like a computer going into rest mode. Something far more extraordinary begins to unfold. During those dark, quiet hours, while you're completely unaware, your body is having a conversation with forces beyond your conscious understanding. It's rebuilding damaged cells. It's repairing tissues worn down by the day's activities. It's purging toxins that have accumulated in your blood, your organs, your very tissues. Your immune system is waging war against invading pathogens and abnormal cells that could become disease. Your chemistry is rebalancing itself, hormones are being secreted, neural pathways are being strengthened or pruned. This is the presence of healing, not the absence of waking. This is your body's journey back to wholeness, a journey it makes every single night if you allow it. But here's the revelation that changes everything, the part that most people never grasp. This healing doesn't happen automatically. Goldsmith was emphatic about this point. You can't just close your eyes and expect miracles to occur. The transformation that should happen during sleep depends entirely on the conditions you've created. Are you opening the channels for divine healing energy to flow through every cell, or are you blocking that flow with decisions you don't even realize you're making? If this kind of deep, transformative content speaks to you, make sure you subscribe to this channel. This is where we explore the spiritual truths that actually make a difference in your life, and I don't want you to miss what's coming next. Most of us are blocking it. We're making choices throughout our day, especially in those critical hours before sleep, that create barriers between our physical body and the source of all healing. We're carrying toxic mental states into our beds. We're surrounding ourselves with environments that interfere with natural restoration. We're holding on to emotions that turn our internal chemistry acidic and inflammatory. And then we wonder why we're not healing, why we're aging faster than we should, why chronic conditions persist no matter what treatments we try. The impact of this disconnection is profound. Every night that you block the healing process is a night your body doesn't get to complete its restorative work. The damage accumulates, the toxins build up, the inflammation spreads, the decline accelerates, and you wake up feeling the evidence of that blockage in your fatigue, your pain, your mental fog, your sense that something fundamental isn't working right. Your body is trying to tell you something. It's trying to show you that the connection has been severed. Now, I want to go even deeper into this, because understanding what blocks healing is just the beginning. What matters is recognizing the specific patterns in your own life, the habits you've developed without questioning them, the mindset you bring to sleep itself. Write in the comments, "I'm ready to understand," if this is resonating with you, because what comes next reveals exactly how these blocks manifest in your daily routine and what you can do about them tonight. Let me show you what's really happening in that moment when you drift from waking to sleeping. There's a transfer of power taking place, a shift so profound that most people never stop to consider its significance. Your conscious mind, the part of you that's been controlling, planning, worrying and managing everything all day long, finally loosens its grip. It steps back, and in that space, something extraordinary moves in to take its place. Your subconscious mind, which Goldsmith understood to be directly connected to universal consciousness, to infinite intelligence, to what many call God, assumes control of your physical body. This isn't just a change in brainwave patterns. This is your personal consciousness making contact with something vastly greater than itself. And during this transfer, healing energies that flow through all of creation, the same force that makes plants grow and wounds close and broken bones knit back together, can finally enter your body without the interference of your conscious mind's doubts, fears, and resistance. This is when the real work begins. Your cells, now operating under the guidance of infinite intelligence rather than your limited conscious awareness, start their repair protocols. Your immune system, freed from the suppression of stress hormones, launches into battle against infections you didn't even know you had. Your organs begin their deep detoxification processes, filtering out the accumulated poisons from your blood and tissues. Your nervous system, which has been firing in fight or flight mode all day, finally resets itself. Your glands release the healing hormones that only come during deep rest. This is the behind-the-scenes miracle that should be happening every single night. But here's the revelation that transforms everything: the quality of this. Healing, the depth of this restoration, depends entirely on your spiritual alignment in those final moments before sleep. Goldsmith was absolutely clear about this. If you carry anger into your bed, if your last thoughts are replaying arguments or rehearsing resentments, you're creating vibrational blocks that prevent healing energy from flowing properly. If you're consumed with worry about tomorrow, if fear is running through your mind as you close your eyes, if you're mentally attacking yourself with criticism and self-judgment, you're essentially closing the door on the very forces that want to heal you. Your mental state and your spiritual state aren't separate from your physical healing. They're the gateway to it. Those final thoughts before sleep, the emotional frequency you're vibrating at when consciousness transfers from your mind to the infinite, these set the tone for everything that happens in your body over the next 8 hours. It's like tuning a radio. If you're tuned to the frequency of peace, gratitude, and spiritual trust, healing flows in clearly and powerfully. If you're tuned to anger, fear, and resistance, the signal gets blocked, distorted, interrupted. This is why two people can sleep the same number of hours and wake up in completely different states. One feels restored because they created the conditions for healing. The other feels depleted because they blocked the process with their mindset. The impact of this understanding on your health journey cannot be overstated because it means you have far more control than you realize. Put down, "I choose healing," if you're starting to see how your thoughts before sleep might be affecting your restoration. So what's the practical solution to creating this spiritual alignment before sleep? Goldsmith gave very specific guidance on this, and it might surprise you because he wasn't talking about religious obligation or complicated rituals. He was talking about prayer and gratitude as a healing protocol, as deliberate as taking medicine but infinitely more powerful. This is a decision you make, a conscious choice to end your day differently than you've been ending it. When you take just a few minutes before sleep to align your consciousness with divine love and peace, when you express genuine gratitude for the blessings in your life, when you pray not from desperation but from trust, you're doing something very specific on an energetic level. You're opening a channel. You're creating a clear pathway for healing energy to flow through every cell in your body throughout the entire night. This isn't about being good or spiritual enough. This is about understanding how the system works and using it correctly. Think of it like preparing soil before planting seeds. You wouldn't throw seeds on hard, rocky ground and expect a harvest. You prepare the soil first. Prayer and gratitude before sleep are how you prepare your body and consciousness to receive the healing that wants to flow to you. Without this preparation, you're trying to heal on hard ground. The transformation can't take root. And here's what makes this even more compelling. Modern science is now proving what Goldsmith taught decades ago. Researchers have discovered that during deep sleep, your brain activates a cleansing system that flushes out toxic proteins, the same proteins that accumulate and cause Alzheimer's disease. During REM sleep, your mind processes the emotional experiences of the day and consolidates important memories, essentially performing psychological healing while you're unconscious. During the deepest stages of sleep, your pituitary gland releases growth hormone that floods through your system, repairing damaged tissues and building new cellular structures. Your immune system becomes incredibly active during sleep, releasing specialized proteins called cytokines that fight inflammation and coordinate your body's defense against disease. Your heart rate drops, your blood pressure decreases, giving your cardiovascular system the recovery time it desperately needs. Every single system in your body shifts into healing mode. The science is clear and measurable. But what science is only beginning to understand is what Goldsmith knew all along. This physical healing process is intimately connected to your spiritual state. The data shows that people who practice gratitude and prayer before sleep experience deeper sleep cycles, more consistent healing hormone release, and better immune function. The mind-body connection isn't metaphorical. It's biological reality with spiritual roots. Your thoughts, your emotions, your spiritual alignment, these don't just affect how you feel. They directly influence the chemical cascades, the neural patterns, and the cellular processes that determine whether your body heals or deteriorates during sleep. Now, understanding this connection opens up a completely different approach to health, one that puts the power back in your hands rather than leaving you dependent on external interventions. Write in the comments, "I see the connection," if you're beginning to grasp how your spiritual practices directly impact your physical restoration. Let me share something that might make you uncomfortable because it directly challenges habits most people follow without question. Every night, millions of people eat heavy meals right before bed, thinking it doesn't matter as long as they're getting their sleep hours. But here's the hidden truth about what's actually happening inside your body when you do this. When you eat processed foods, heavy proteins, or large meals close to bedtime, you're forcing your body to make a critical decision. Digest this food or heal damaged cells. It cannot do both simultaneously. Your stomach has to churn and break down that food. Your liver has to work overtime processing fats and filtering toxins from your bloodstream. Your pancreas struggles to manage the blood sugar spike. All of this requires enormous amounts of energy, the same energy that should be redirected to cellular repair, immune function, and tissue regeneration. So while you're lying there thinking you're resting, your body is actually in a state of metabolic stress, postponing the healing work that can only happen when digestion isn't competing for resources. Goldsmith understood this principle deeply. He recommended light, easily digestible foods in the evening precisely because he knew the body needs to complete its digestive work before it can shift into full healing mode. This isn't about restriction or deprivation. This is about timing and strategy. Your body wants to heal you, but you have to stop giving it conflicting instructions. You have to stop forcing it to choose between processing food and repairing damage. If this video opened your eyes to something new about healing and sleep, show me by hitting that like button. It's a simple gesture that tells me this content is reaching the people who need it most. Now, beyond what you're putting into your body, there's another layer of interference that most people never consider: the environment you're sleeping in. Goldsmith emphasized that your sleeping space profoundly affects your healing capacity. He spoke about the absolute necessity of fresh air circulation, of well-ventilated rooms, because your body requires oxygen to perform cellular repair. When you're breathing stale, oxygen-depleted air all night, you're starving your cells of the fuel they need for regeneration. But the environmental impact goes even deeper than air quality. Goldsmith had insights about artificial energies interfering with the body's natural healing frequencies long before our modern world became saturated with electromagnetic radiation. Think about your bedroom right now. Is your phone on your nightstand, just inches from your head? Are you surrounded by Wi-Fi routers, smart devices, electronic alarm clocks, all emitting electromagnetic frequencies throughout the night? You might not feel these energies, but your cells are responding to them. These artificial frequencies create a kind of static interference with your body's own electromagnetic field, the subtle energy patterns that coordinate healing processes at the cellular level. It's like trying to have a quiet conversation in a room full of loud machinery. The healing signals your body is trying to send and receive get disrupted, distorted, overwhelmed by the electronic noise surrounding you. The transformation you're seeking might be blocked not by lack of willpower or bad genetics, but by the environment you've unknowingly created. This revelation changes the entire approach to sleep and healing, because it means you have concrete, actionable decisions you can make tonight that will immediately impact your body's ability to restore itself. Put down: environment matters. If you're realizing how your sleeping space might be affecting your healing journey, but there's something even more insidious blocking your healing, something you carry with you every single night without realizing the damage it's causing. I'm talking about the mental and emotional toxicity you take to bed with you. Goldsmith revealed something that modern psychoneuroimmunology is now confirming. When you hold on to anger, fear, resentment, or anxiety, you're not just experiencing negative emotions. You're creating actual chemical changes in your body that acidify your entire system and block the flow of healing energy. When you lie down angry at someone, replaying the argument in your mind, nursing your grievances and resentments, your body doesn't register that as mere thought. Your body experiences it as a threat and responds by flooding your bloodstream with cortisol and adrenaline. Instead of marinating in healing hormones like growth hormone and melatonin, you're bathing every cell in stress chemicals designed for survival, not restoration. Your immune system gets suppressed. Your digestive system shuts down. Your cellular repair mechanisms go offline, all because you're holding on to emotional poison. The same thing happens when you carry worry into sleep. When your last thoughts are anxious rehearsals of tomorrow's problems or fearful projections about what might go wrong, you activate your sympathetic nervous system, the fight or flight response that's designed to help you escape danger. But this response is incompatible with healing. Your body literally cannot heal and defend at the same time. It must choose one, and when you're lying there consumed with anxiety, you're forcing it to choose defense over restoration every single time. This is the brutal truth behind why so many people don't heal despite getting adequate sleep hours. The transformation they're seeking is blocked not by time in bed, but by the mindset they bring to bed. You can sleep for 10 hours, but if those 10 hours are spent in a state of emotional toxicity, your body will wake up more damaged than when it lay down. Now, even if you manage to clear your mind and release your emotional burdens, there's another critical factor that determines whether healing actually occurs. Goldsmith was insistent about this. You must sleep during the natural dark hours. This isn't arbitrary preference. Your body operates on ancient rhythms that have been hardwired into your biology over millions of years of evolution. These circadian rhythms are tied directly to the movement of the sun. When you stay awake until 2 or 3 in the morning, scrolling through your phone or binge-watching shows, you're not just being undisciplined, you're creating internal chaos at the cellular level. Your hormones are released on precise schedules. Your organs perform specific detoxification and repair functions at specific times. Your immune system follows predictable patterns tied to day and night cycles. When you fight against these natural rhythms, when you try to convince your body that 3 a.m. is the new bedtime, you disrupt the entire orchestration of healing that should be happening. The impact of this misalignment compounds over time. It's not just one night of poor healing. It's years of accumulated damage, because your body never gets the synchronized restoration it was designed to receive. Write in the comments, alignment is everything, if you're recognizing how your schedule might be sabotaging your healing journey. There's something most people never consider, a detail so simple it seems almost trivial, yet Goldsmith understood its profound impact on healing. I'm talking about the physical position you sleep in. You probably just flop into bed, however feels comfortable in the moment. But that unconscious decision is affecting every organ system in your body throughout the night. Goldsmith frequently recommended sleeping on your right side, and the reasoning behind this reveals just how precisely designed your body's healing mechanisms actually are. When you sleep on your right side, you enhance blood circulation in ways that optimize organ function. Your liver, which is your primary detoxification organ and works its hardest during sleep hours, operates most efficiently in this position. The liver is responsible for filtering toxins from your blood, breaking down hormones, processing fats, and performing hundreds of chemical reactions essential to healing. When you sleep on your right side, you facilitate this entire detoxification process because gravity and anatomy work together to support optimal liver function. Contrast this with sleeping on your stomach, which compresses your organs, restricts your breathing, and prevents the deep, restorative sleep your body needs for healing. Or consider that many people sleep in whatever position feels momentarily comfortable without realizing they're creating physical barriers to the restoration their body is trying to perform. This isn't about perfection. This is about making informed decisions that support your healing journey rather than inadvertently sabotaging it. Now, beyond the physical positioning of your body, there's a spiritual preparation that Goldsmith taught as essential for optimal healing. Prayer and meditation before sleep aren't just practices that calm your anxious mind, though they certainly do that. They literally prepare your body at a cellular level to receive healing energy. When you take those final moments before sleep to consciously invite healing, when you surrender your body to divine care rather than trying to control everything, when you release the burdens and struggles of the day and place your trust in spiritual restoration, you're creating the optimal internal conditions for miraculous healing to occur. Your intention matters more than most people realize. Your faith, not as blind belief, but as genuine trust in a power greater than yourself, opens channels that skepticism and fear keep closed. Your willingness to surrender control, to stop gripping so tightly to outcomes and worries, allows the divine intelligence that flows through all creation to do its work unimpeded. This is the hidden truth about healing that modern medicine often misses. The transformation happens not just through mechanical processes, but through spiritual alignment. Think about the difference between someone who collapses into bed exhausted, mind still racing with tomorrow's problems, versus someone who takes 5 minutes to pray with genuine gratitude, to consciously release control, to trust that their body and spirit will be restored while they sleep. The second person has prepared the soil for healing. They've opened the door, they've created receptivity, and their body responds to that intention throughout the entire night with deeper healing processes than the exhausted, anxious person could ever access. Put down I'm learning to surrender if this revelation is shifting how you think about your nightly routine. So let's talk about what this actually looks like in practice, because understanding the principles means nothing if you don't implement them. Creating a sleep sanctuary isn't about spending thousands on expensive mattresses or gadgets. It's about making intentional decisions that honor your body as the healing temple it was designed to be. Your bedroom should be genuinely dark, and I mean complete darkness, not the glow of electronics or streetlights filtering through thin curtains. Real darkness triggers melatonin production, the hormone that orchestrates your entire healing cascade during sleep. This means investing in blackout curtains or removing the electronics that emit those constant little lights throughout the night. It means opening a window to ensure fresh air circulation, even if it's just slightly, because stale air means oxygen-depleted air, and your cells cannot repair themselves without adequate oxygen. The temperature matters too. Your body needs to cool down as part of its natural healing process. So keeping your room between 60 and 67 degrees facilitates this biological requirement rather than fighting against it. The hours before sleep require just as much attention as the sleep environment itself. Stop eating 2 to 3 hours before bed so your body has completed digestion and can redirect all its energy to restoration. Limit or eliminate alcohol, which might make you drowsy, but prevents the deep sleep stages where real healing occurs. Turn off your screens at least an hour before sleep, preferably 2, and use that time for activities that elevate your consciousness rather than agitate it. Read something spiritually uplifting. Write in a gratitude journal. Do gentle stretching that releases the physical tension your body has been holding all day. Now, here's where everything we've discussed comes together into the most powerful revelation of all. Your body doesn't just heal randomly or mechanically. Your body heals according to the image you hold in your consciousness. If you see yourself as sick, broken, declining, and damaged, your body receives that instruction and works to manifest that image in physical form. If you see yourself as healing, whole, vital, and divinely sustained, your body receives that instruction instead and directs its resources toward manifesting health. During sleep, when your conscious mind finally stops interfering, your subconscious beliefs take over completely. This is why the affirmations and prayers you speak before sleep are so incredibly powerful. They're not just positive thinking exercises. They're programming instructions for your subconscious mind, which then guides every cellular process, every hormonal release, every immune response throughout the night. You're literally telling your body what to build, what to become, what to manifest. Most people have been programming themselves for disease without realizing it. Their last thoughts are worries about their symptoms, fears about getting worse, beliefs that they're powerless victims of circumstance, and their bodies dutifully follow those instructions all night long. But when you shift the image in your consciousness, when you claim your healing with faith and conviction, when you see yourself as already whole in spiritual reality, even if physical manifestation hasn't caught up yet, you give your body completely different marching orders. Write in the comments, "I choose the healing." Image, if you're ready to change what you've been unconsciously programming into your body. If you've made it this far, you're clearly someone who's serious about understanding the deeper truths behind healing, someone who's not satisfied with surface-level answers. That tells me something important about you. You're on a journey toward genuine transformation, and these insights from Joel Goldsmith's teachings are exactly what you've been searching for, even if you didn't know it until now. I create content like this because I believe this wisdom needs to reach the people who are ready for it, people like you who understand that real healing goes far beyond what conventional approaches offer. If this resonates with you, if you want more of these deep explorations into spiritual truths that can actually change your life, go ahead and subscribe to this channel. This is where we dive into the teachings that matter, the ones that give you practical tools for real transformation. And do me a favor, leave a comment right now saying, "This message was meant for me, so I know you were here, so I know this content is reaching the right people." Your engagement helps this message spread to others who need it just as much as you did. And if you found value in what we explored today, hit that like button. It helps more than you might think. Now there's another video right here that goes even deeper into how your thoughts shape your physical reality. It's a natural continuation of what we've been discussing, and I think you'll find it just as eye-opening. Click and continue with me over there. I'll see you in the next one.